Thank you for hanging in there with us as we discuss how I-40 being built through Jefferson Street changed that Black community. Andre is joining me here live, and he's willing to take any of your questions tonight. So I'm curious, as a guy in D.C., what made you interested in studying this piece of Nashville's history?
Well, when you look across the country, there's this narrative that Black communities aren't valuable, that they're in disarray. But the reality is that there are assets, there are great people, they're doing great work, and they're just not being invested in. And when if anything goes wrong in a Black community, we blame the people and we ignore the policy violence that have been inflicted upon Black Americans for generations. If this had happened, if that highway was built across Vanderbilt would have suffered for a long period of time. And so when instead of blaming Black people, we should look to see where there's a lack of investment. I say all the time that there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. And we're not going to jail away this problem. The high incarceration rates in Nashville will not lead to growth. You're literally arresting economic development by pulling people and talent out of the communities. And there's a personal aspect of this. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My father grew up in Detroit. And in all of these areas, the Federal Highway Administration built highways through Black communities, decimating the economic hubs of these communities, hurting the economic prospects of entire regions. And we're not going to get past this until we invest in Black communities. And so when I look at Nashville, you see the strength, you see the assets, you see the assets that you can build upon for economic growth. But if there's this narrative that says we should not invest in those assets in Black people, you're never going to see growth, because nothing grows without investment. One of the things, we did another study that we scraped all the Yelp data from all the businesses across the country. And what we found is that Black, brown, and Asian businesses actually score higher on Yelp than their white counterparts, but they get less investment as the neighborhood gets Blacker. And it's robbing high quality businesses upwards of $4 billion. Now, there was a saying where I grew up, elders who used to say, our ice is just as cold. And they knew that if you don't invest, if you don't patronize businesses in Black communities, you lessen the amount of revenue, you lessen the amount of development, and you distort the market in a way where you're forcing high quality businesses to compete with low quality businesses, and that's not good for overall market. And so we need to invest in Black businesses. We need to change the narrative that Black neighborhoods are not worthy of investment. And when we do, and when we invest in Black people, when we invest in Black businesses, we're going to see unprecedented growth. And so, and I want to be clear that there is a moral obligation to address the wrongs of the past. There is a unpaid invoice around the Reconstruction, Jim Crow segregation, housing discrimination, criminal justice bias. All of these things cause significant injury, and we need to own up to it. So this is not just about the economics of it. It's about addressing the moral debt that is owed to Black residents, particularly in Nashville, where it has so many gifts to provide, but so little investment relative to the white population.
From your research and your travels, would you say, is there anywhere like, I don't know, Memphis or another city you visited that has actually done a good job in preserving culture? Or have you seen interstates and highways being built through Black communities, throughout the past?
Well, it's a sad statement that the story of Nashville is the story of Black America all across the country. We just celebrated memorializing Black Wall Street, but there's a Black Wall Street in most metropolitan areas, whether you're talking about Detroit, whether you're talking about Nashville, Memphis. All of these cities had a certain level of displacement caused by federal and state policy, local policy. And it is clear that there was racial bias involved. Because whenever you saw these developments occurring, as white suburbs started to develop, they built highways to accommodate people moving out of the city and into the suburb. And it's just, over the country, all across the country, in major metropolitan areas, the highways were built through Black neighborhoods. And so it's a sad statement, but Nashville represents so many metropolitan areas where highways were built through Black neighborhoods.
We're going to go to a caller. Linda, do you have a question? If so, can you go ahead and ask it? You're live now.
Yes, thank you. My question is, how do we invest with the right opportunities in the Black neighborhoods? In other words, investing versus gentrification, which is starting to happen in the Jefferson Street and Buchanan areas.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of developing commercial corridors. We need to have a focused effort on what I call, and I have a book out called Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. And in that book, I outline how we should identify the commercial corridors to invest in so that we can concentrate resources, incubate businesses, create home ownership programs around those commercial corridors. But we really do need a block by block strategy of investing to say, hey, we need neighborhood facing businesses developed in this commercial corridor, but we also need high revenue generating businesses, tech firms, and other high revenue generating firms located in those same areas, so that those revenues can bleed into communities that need the resources, so they can convert the sole proprietorships into multiple employer firms. And so I recommend really concentrating efforts in particular neighborhoods. Jefferson Street, clearly we need to have a concrete plan. Now, no pun intended, concrete plan. What's interesting that there will always be neighborhood fights, because if you say we're going to concentrate in this neighborhood, another neighborhood is going to say, why not us? And so, but that's where it takes a good negotiating politician to say, hey, we're going to take this block by block, but we're going to invest, we're going to concentrate hundreds of millions of dollars in an area to make sure that we can see growth and highlight the assets in Black America. Now, it goes without saying, we can accentuate music, culture, Black-owned businesses in this area. We don't necessarily have to whitewash our businesses and the like. We can have Black businesses and have that be the feature of the corridor. And so for me, it starts with a block-to-block effort that increases ownership, business ownership, increases real estate ownership, increases home ownership, and really just be very deliberate that we're going to start with Jefferson, and then we're going to move on to other sections. to increase ownership and development in these Black communities. And I will say this, there are a lot of great businesses in Nashville, but there are a lot of sole proprietorships, a lot of businesses with only 2 employees. We also need to invest in scaling those businesses up, because if Biden gets the infrastructure bill done, then we can have those companies partake when they have 10, 20, 30 employees in these initiatives, increasing the odds of revenue coming in to Black neighborhoods and enabling Black business owners to participate in their own recovery. And so for me, but again, it goes back to a block to block, and we need to do away. This is where I get a little bit cynical. We're always talking about regional efforts to improve the economy, saying, hey, we're going to look at the region. And whenever we do that, in my opinion, we ignore the strength in local communities. And so for me, it starts with going at the micro neighborhood level and making sure we invest at the neighborhood level, making sure that we create new business owners, supporting current business owners, increasing home ownership opportunities, business ownership, real estate opportunities, and start there. And then connect them to the supply chains, to the overall development of the region. But too often, when we try our economic strategy, we ignore the assets, the strength in Black neighborhoods and communities.
All right, we have another caller. I guess lots of people wanting to ask you a question. Rose, can you hear us all right? And do you have a question for our guest?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, I just was listening to your topic here, and you was basically talking about the area of Jefferson Street. Okay, Jefferson Street, long time ago, we had businesses galore, and somehow or another they've been bought out by, other constituents. I don't want to go into all of that, but they just been bought out, and I don't know the reason why they was bought out, but in order to build that up, I just have a feeling that we need, yes, people to come down there and promote and buy and things. We need to get our attitude together as a group of people. When others come in, we need to be friendly to all people. We need not to, cater to any particular persons or race. When you come into the businesses, we need to be actually people oriented. We need to have a better customer service clientele, whatever business is going on down there. And also, when we have businesses there, we need to sort of do something about the crime that's all over the area. But when Black areas are prominent, there's more crime that comes down from our own constituents, our own people. Now, this is a problem, This is a problem. We need to fix that in order to actually have some, promote the business or to extend the business or to invest in the businesses. We need to solve those little ground part problems. And, and therefore, we can actually have a good business down there, and we need to stop giving, buying out our businesses to all people. We need to stay as a group and fight for our businesses when we have it, and make it good by just having good clientele, with the customer orientation, no respect of people. And we need to get and say, hey, this is for everybody. We do not need to break down our area in any kind of crime. Now, it's crime everywhere, but in our area, we need to, as people, get our SHIT together. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear the passion, and I just want to direct people to report before I make these comments. I would love for people just to get the report, 5-star reviews, 1-star profits, the devaluation of businesses in Black communities. And I described it earlier, where we scraped all the Yelp data of businesses across the country, and we found that Black businesses, brown businesses, Asian-owned businesses actually score higher in Yelp. So there's some, misconceptions about Black businesses not having the right service, not having great management. Actually, we have as good as management, as great service as any other business, but we're not getting investment. Now, on the issue of crime is a serious issue, is a detractor. But we also need to know what caused crime. It's overall a lack of investment. You generally see in any neighborhood, black, white, Hispanic, middle class neighborhoods generally don't have violent crime. They have other kinds of crime, but not the kind of violent crime. But when we talk about poor communities, we don't talk about improving the economic standing in those communities to eradicate crime. We essentially lean on punishment. And punishment is not the route to go for economic development. You are literally extracting people out of communities, taking away talent. You're taking away people who can contribute to the economy. It is just not a good means to develop a community, and then you rob people of role models and the like. Now, I say all that to say that Jefferson and the area can develop, but it has to have some form of investment, and that's why I always say, hey, I recognize crime as a problem. I recognize unemployment as a problem. But the solution has a lot to do with investment and trusting in Black communities. When we can convert the sole proprietorships, the mom and pop businesses, to major employer firms where we have more than one employee, and we're talking about dozens of employees, that's going to take investment. And I'll say this, that the reason why people have to sell their businesses, people have to sell their homes, is simply because they have a lack of individual wealth. Black wealth, but white wealth has 10 times that of black wealth. Meaning, white families, the median wealth is about 170,000 compared to only 17,000 for Black families. And so, when you don't have wealth, when you have an economic shock, say the pandemic, or a storm, or a housing crisis, Black people take 2 steps back because they simply don't have we don't have the 401ks to lean on. We don't have the reserves to lean on, the stocks and bonds. And that's what generally people use when something happens. I mean, actually, last year when the CARES Act rolled out, and the PPP loan program, the payroll protection program was rolled out, 95% of Black businesses were excluded because they did not include sole proprietorships in that initial rollout. It was 95% of Black firms, 74% of white firms. Now, that just decimated Black businesses because, again, if you don't have wealth, guess what you got to use? A credit card. And if you have any kind of long period where we have to shutter, you're going to eventually close with the debt. And then if you have a job market that is not absorbing Black people in the economy, it gets worse. So I hear the frustration, but I'll say this, I'll repeat this. There's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. That we can't keep blaming Black people for this. When we know that federal, state, and local jurisdictions created anti-Black policy that extracted wealth from communities, from Black communities. The highway construction decimated Black businesses, decimated wealth for a long period of time. And we can't skirt that issue. And when we do, when we ignore that policy, those policies, we're just burying our heads in the sand to the race of it, and you have nowhere else to go but to blame Black people. So for me, this is about saying, hey, there was injury caused, and we can correct it. by investing in black firms, investing in black homeowners, investing in converting low-income renters to potential homeowners. So there's a way out of this, but it can't come through the continued demonization of black people.
Thanks so much. We do have to go to a break, but hold that thought and we'll be right back.